I see the screen in your hand, the unopened message, the missed call, the test result you have not checked, the conversation you know is coming. You are afraid the next piece of information will change something you cannot easily put back. I am not asking you to pretend that possibility does not matter. I am asking you not to let fear live the future before the future arrives. You do not have to become fearless before you take the next necessary step. That is the first thing I want you to know. Courage is not the absence of fear in your body. Courage can be a trembling hand that still opens the message, makes the appointment, asks the question, or tells the truth. Fear may be present without being in charge. Part of what is exhausting you is not only the possibility of bad news, it is the belief that if you imagine every terrible outcome in advance, you will somehow be safer when one of them arrives. Your mind calls this preparation. But preparation and mental suffering are not the same thing. Wise preparation asks, what can I do if this happens? Fearful rehearsal says, I must emotionally live through every version of disaster now. That difference matters, because you may have been carrying pain from events that have not happened. You may be grieving conversations that have not taken place, defending yourself against words nobody has spoken, calculating losses that are still unknown, or rehearsing how you will survive a future you do not yet possess. And because the uncertainty feels heavy, you have begun to treat heaviness as evidence. Listen carefully. Uncertainty is real, but uncertainty is not the same thing as ruin. You may not know what the doctor will say, what the employer will decide, what the family member will admit, what the financial number will be, whether the relationship will continue, or what the official result will show. Not knowing can be deeply uncomfortable, but I do not know, and everything is already destroyed, are two different statements. One is a fact about your knowledge. The other is a conclusion fear is trying to make for you. You may notice what happens when the possibility of bad news enters your mind. Your attention narrows. Ordinary tasks become hard to finish. You read the same sentence twice. You check your phone again, even though nothing has changed. You hear a notification, and your body reacts before your mind knows what it is. You replay the last conversation. You search for clues in someone's tone. You try to interpret silence as information. Then your mind reaches for certainty. It wants a guarantee, not because guarantees are always possible, but because you are tired of the tension of not knowing. So you may ask the same question in several different ways. You may search online for one more answer. You may text someone for reassurance, feel calmer for 10 minutes, and then need reassurance again. You may avoid the information entirely, hoping that if you do not look, you can postpone the reality. None of this means you are weak. It means fear is trying to protect you with strategies that can easily become costly. Fear often says, if I keep thinking, I will find the angle that makes me safe. It promises control. It tells you that enough analysis can remove uncertainty. It tells you that enough rehearsal can prevent shock. It tells you that if you expect the worst, you cannot be disappointed. It may even tell you that dread is responsible, because calm would mean you are not taking the situation seriously. But I want you to see what that strategy is actually trying to protect. It may be protecting you from surprise. It may be protecting you from shame. It may be protecting you from needing help. It may be protecting you from the feeling of being unprepared. It may be protecting you from admitting that there are outcomes you cannot control. That is why simply telling yourself, stop worrying, often does not work. The worry has a job in your mind. It believes it is standing guard. So instead of shaming yourself for being afraid, ask a better question. What is fear trying to do for me right now, and is it actually doing that job well? If fear says, I am helping you prepare, look at the evidence. Are you making a useful plan, or are you repeating the same catastrophic story? Are you gathering information from a reliable source, or are you searching until you find the most frightening possibility? Are you deciding what question to ask, or are you creating 10 imaginary conversations and losing sleep over all of them? Preparation has an endpoint. Fearful rehearsal rarely does. Preparation can produce a next step. Rehearsal produces another loop. Preparation can say, if the result is difficult, I will ask what options are available. Fearful rehearsal says, if the result is difficult, everything after that must also go badly. Preparation respects what is known and what is not known. Fear fills the unknown with the darkest available story, and then reacts to that story as if it has already been confirmed. This is where I want to lead you into a different way of carrying what you do not know. The psalmist says in Psalm 56 verse 3, "When I am afraid, I put my trust in you." Notice what that does not say. It does not say, "If I am faithful, I will never feel afraid." It does not say, "When I understand the outcome, then I trust." It does not say, "When I have proof that nothing painful can happen, then I become steady." That is important for you, because you may have been waiting for the emotional weather inside you to become calm before you move. You may think that if your heart is still pounding, if your thoughts are still restless, or if your stomach still tightens when you think about the news, you are not ready to act in faith. But trust can begin before the feeling changes. You can say, "I am afraid, and I will still tell the truth. I am afraid, and I will still make the call. I am afraid, and I will still ask the doctor the question. I am afraid, and I will still open the letter. I am afraid, and I will still open the letter. I am afraid, and I will not punish the people I love with the fear of a future that has not been confirmed." That is not denial. That is direction. Faith does not require you to call a painful possibility good. It does not require you to smile at what may be serious. It does not require you to refuse facts, avoid medical care, ignore financial reality, stay silent about danger, or pretend that consequences do not matter. Faith asks you to refuse one specific lie, that fear deserves to become your guide simply because the situation is uncertain. There is another reason this matters. When fear becomes your guide, it begins to shape more than your thoughts. It shapes where your attention goes. You can be physically present in a room and mentally absent because you are living inside a future scenario. Someone you love may be talking to you, but part of you is still rereading the message. You may answer more sharply than you intended because your body has been braced all day. You may become impatient with ordinary requests because everything feels like one demand too many. You may withdraw because you do not want to explain what you are afraid of. You may also over-explain, asking others to carry the same uncertainty until they are exhausted too. This is one of the hidden costs of trying to control the future with thought. The future begins to consume the relationships you actually have in the present. You may tell yourself, "I cannot focus until I know." But sometimes knowing does not arrive quickly. The test takes days. The decision is delayed. The conversation gets rescheduled. The person does not respond. The investigation continues. The number is not final. If your permission to live depends on certainty, your life can be placed on hold by someone else's timeline. I am not telling you to be carefree. I am teaching you how to remain faithful while information is incomplete. The question is not, how do I make uncertainty comfortable? Some uncertainty will remain uncomfortable. The question is, how do I stop handing uncertainty the authority to define the meaning of my future? That is why the thought, "The future is already ruined because it feels uncertain," can feel convincing, even though it is not logically honest. The feeling is real. The conclusion may not be. You can respect your feeling without treating it as a forecast. This is a mature form of steadiness. It does not insult your nervous system. It does not force positive thinking. It does not demand that you call yourself irrational. It simply separates three things that fear keeps trying to blend together: what you know, what you do not know, and what you are imagining. Try that separation when the next wave comes. What do I know? What do I not know? What am I imagining? You may know that a doctor asked for another test. You may not know what the result will be. You may be imagining the hardest diagnosis, and then imagining every consequence after it. The mind can move from one fact to a whole chain of suffering in seconds. Then the body responds to the chain, not merely to the fact. That does not mean the feared event cannot happen. I will not offer you false certainty. Some difficult news is real. People receive diagnoses they did not want. Jobs end. Relationships change. Financial problems become serious. Legal processes bring difficult consequences. Loved ones make choices you cannot control. Your faith does not need to be built on the promise that bad news will never come. It can be built on a deeper promise. You do not have to become a different person before you face what is true, and you do not have to face truth alone. 1 Peter 5 verse 7 says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. This does not describe anxiety as something too embarrassing to bring before my Father. It assumes that anxiety exists and gives it a direction. You are not told to hide it until you can pray with perfect calm. You are invited to place it where care is personal. That matters, because anxiety often isolates. It tells you that you must solve the future privately before you can rest. It turns your mind into a closed room where every possibility argues at once. Casting anxiety is not one dramatic moment in which you never feel it again. Sometimes, it is repeated surrender. You notice that you have picked the fear back up, and you place it down again. You notice that you have moved from useful planning into endless rehearsal, and you return to the next real responsibility. You notice that you have asked 5 people for reassurance, and still feel uncertain, and you choose not to ask a 6th person the same question. Surrender becomes practical when it changes what you do with the next 5 minutes. Maybe the hard step is opening the portal and reading the result instead of refreshing the page for an hour. Maybe it is calling the office and asking when you can expect an answer. Maybe it is writing down 3 questions so you do not panic and forget them during the appointment. Maybe it is asking someone trustworthy to sit with you while you receive the news. Maybe it is deciding that you will not search symptoms online after you have already received appropriate medical guidance. Maybe the hard step is not receiving information. Maybe it is giving information. You may be the one who needs to tell a family member the truth, disclose a mistake, ask for help, admit a financial problem, or say that a situation is no longer sustainable. Fear can make you postpone the conversation while rehearsing it constantly. You feel busy because you are thinking about it, but thinking is not always movement. I want you to learn the difference between emotional activity and faithful action. So when you feel the loop beginning, do not only ask, "How do I calm down?" Ask, "What responsibility am I avoiding while I try to feel certain?" Sometimes calming down is helpful and necessary. Slow breathing, a walk, a glass of water, stepping away from the screen, or talking with a grounded person can help your body come out of a state of alarm. But the goal is not to manufacture a perfect feeling. The goal is to become regulated enough to act wisely. Steadiness is not performance. It is a way of staying connected to reality, to wisdom, to people, and to me, while fear is still making noise. There is also a difference between a question that helps you prepare and a question that helps fear multiply. A useful question has a practical destination. If the result is difficult, who should I call? What documents do I need? What options should I ask about? What expense can I delay? Who can come with me? What is the next deadline? What symptoms require urgent attention? What boundary would keep this conversation safe? A fear-multiplying question has no natural stopping point. What if this gets worse? And then this happens, and then that happens, and then everyone leaves, and then I cannot recover, and then my whole life is gone. You do not need to ban every what if. Some what if questions are wise. If there is a serious medical possibility, you may need to know what symptoms mean you should seek urgent care. If a job may end, you may need to review your budget. If a legal matter is active, you may need qualified legal advice. If a relationship has become unsafe, you may need a safety plan and trusted support. Faith is not refusing contingency plans. The issue is whether planning serves action or becomes a substitute for living. This is where fear can become morally confusing for sincere people. You may think, if I stop worrying, I am being irresponsible. You may believe that anxiety proves love. A parent worries because the child matters. A spouse worries because the relationship matters. A patient worries because life matters. An employee worries because the family depends on the paycheck. Love can explain why the situation matters. It does not mean fear must supervise every thought. Some of you become suspicious of peace when the outcome is unresolved. You think calm is only permitted after good news, but steadiness is not a reward for certainty. It is a practice of trust within uncertainty. Isaiah 26 verse 3 speaks of steadfast peace, for the mind stayed on God, because it trusts in Him. Do not turn that verse into a weapon against yourself. It is not saying that every anxious thought proves spiritual failure. It gives you an anchor. A stayed mind is not a mind that never wanders. It is a mind that knows where to return. Let me take you deeper, because the issue is not only that you are afraid of bad news. The deeper issue is what you believe uncertainty means about your ability to be faithful. You may have quietly defined faithfulness as knowing enough to make the perfect move. If so, uncertainty makes you feel morally trapped. You are afraid that one wrong decision will prove you failed. You want a level of clarity that life does not always offer. But faithfulness is not the same as perfect prediction. You can make a wise decision with incomplete information. You can ask for counsel and still not know everything. You can choose what is reasonable today and adjust when facts change. You can say, based on what I know now, this is the responsible step. That sentence may feel humble, but humility is exactly what fear resists when it wants control. Fear prefers total certainty or total catastrophe. Wisdom can live in the middle. This is the first future I want you to imagine, not as a prediction, but as a contrast. In one future, you continue to let uncertainty define faithfulness. Every unknown feels like a demand for more thinking. You check repeatedly. You ask for reassurance repeatedly. You postpone decisions because you do not feel ready. You mentally rehearse disaster so often that your body learns to expect it. You become less available to the people around you. Sleep becomes harder. Small responsibilities pile up because your attention is captured by one unresolved question. Then, even if the news is not as bad as you feared, fear has already taken days of your life. And if the news is difficult, you arrive depleted before the real work begins. That is a cost you may not have seen. The strategy that promised to prepare you can leave you less prepared. Now consider the other future. The uncertainty remains. You still wish you knew. Your body still reacts. But you choose a different definition of faithfulness. You say, I will gather what I need, ask what I need to ask, prepare for realistic possibilities, and stop when preparation becomes punishment. You decide when you will check for updates instead of checking every few minutes. You let yourself feel afraid without treating the feeling as a command. In that future, you may still receive difficult news, but you have not surrendered the entire waiting period to fear. You have practiced the kind of steadiness you will need for whatever truth arrives. Do you see the difference? The second future is not safer because nothing painful can happen. It is wiser because you are no longer demanding that prediction do the work of trust. This is the midpoint of what I want to show you. Your battle is not simply against an anxious feeling. It is about who gets to define faithfulness while the outcome is unknown. Fear defines faithfulness as constant vigilance. I define faithfulness as truthful, wise, present obedience. I say, take the hard step while fear is present. This is not a slogan, it is a decision rule. When fear says, wait until you feel certain, ask whether certainty is actually available. When fear says, think about it one more hour, ask whether new information is likely to appear in that hour. When fear says check again, ask whether checking now serves a real purpose. When fear says, ask someone else, ask whether you are seeking useful counsel or temporary relief from uncertainty. When fear says, avoid the message, ask whether delay protects something important or merely extends dread. Your answer will not always be the same. Sometimes you should wait. Sometimes you need more information. Sometimes you need professional advice before acting. Sometimes the safest decision is to pause, but you want the decision to be guided by wisdom, not by the demand to escape every uncomfortable feeling. That distinction is especially important when anxiety is persistent or severe. Prayer can coexist with qualified mental health support. Scripture can guide your heart while a trained professional helps you understand patterns, symptoms, trauma responses, panic, or compulsive reassurance seeking. Do not create a false competition between spiritual care and appropriate human care. I have never asked you to prove faith by refusing help. If your anxiety is interfering with sleep, work, relationships, eating, concentration, or ordinary functioning over time, treat that as meaningful information. If panic feels unmanageable, if you are trapped in checking or reassurance loops, or if fear is becoming difficult to control, identifying a qualified mental health resource can itself be an act of stewardship. You do not have to wait until you are at your worst to ask for support. Within the next 24 hours, if anxiety is persistent or severe, identify one credible resource. That could mean contacting a licensed therapist, your primary care clinician, a reputable counseling service, or another qualified provider available to you. You can keep taking the practical step in front of you, while also building support around the pattern. That is not giving fear more power. It is refusing to let fear isolate you. Now I want to address another hidden cost: the way anxiety can turn relationships into instruments of reassurance. You may call someone and ask, "Do you think it will be okay?" They tell you what you hope to hear. Your body settles briefly. Then the fear returns, because they cannot actually guarantee the outcome. The answer is not to stop asking for support. Support is good. Honest companionship matters, but make the request more truthful. Instead of, "Tell me it is going to be okay," you can say, "I am afraid, and I need someone to sit with me while I make this call." Instead of, "Do you think this means the worst?" you can say, "Help me separate what I know from what I am assuming." Instead of, "Promise me nothing will change," you can say, "Would you pray with me and help me think through my next step?" That kind of support strengthens agency, rather than feeding the search for impossible guarantees. You can also give the people close to you permission not to solve what they cannot solve. There is tenderness in saying, "I do not need you to predict the outcome. I just do not want to carry the waiting alone." Think of fear as information, not instruction. Fear can tell you, "Something matters to me." Fear can tell you, "I feel exposed." Fear can tell you, "I need support." Fear can tell you, "I should gather facts." Fear can tell you, "My body needs regulation." A possibility can be serious and still not be inevitable. Your mind may resist this because it wants a firmer answer. It may say, "But what if the feared event really could happen?" Yes, it could. I am not going to comfort you by denying reality. There are moments when the feared possibility is credible. A doctor may genuinely be concerned. An employer may genuinely be reducing staff. A relationship may genuinely be unstable. A financial notice may genuinely require urgent action. A family conversation may genuinely bring painful information. So what does steadiness look like when the fear is not ridiculous? It looks like wise preparation, without mentally moving into the disaster. Suppose a medical result could be serious. Wise preparation might mean writing down questions, asking what the result means, asking about next steps, inviting someone to the appointment, reviewing your medications, or knowing what symptoms require urgent care. Mentally living in the disaster means imagining every treatment, every loss, every conversation, every financial consequence, every funeral, and every person's reaction before you have even received the result. Those are not the same activity. Suppose your job may be at risk. Wise preparation might mean updating your resume, reviewing essential expenses, gathering documents, learning what benefits or severance rules apply, or reaching out to a trusted professional contact. Mentally living in the disaster means imagining months of unemployment, losing your home, disappointing your children, being judged by everyone you know, and never recovering. Again, not the same activity. This is where your ongoing practice becomes important. Create a repeatable limit on checking, reassurance seeking, or mental rehearsal. Not because checking is always wrong, not because asking for reassurance is shameful, not because thinking ahead is sinful, but because anything that gives short-term relief can become a loop when uncertainty remains. A limit creates a boundary between information gathering and compulsion. You might decide, "I will check the portal at 2 specific times, not every 15 minutes. You might decide, "If I notice I am replaying the same scenario with no new information, I will name it as rehearsal and redirect to a concrete task." The exact limit will depend on the situation. The principle is what matters. Do not give fear unlimited access to your attention. Your attention is part of your stewardship. Where you place it shapes your experience of the waiting. This does not mean you can control every thought that appears. You cannot always stop the first anxious thought. But you can practice what happens after you notice it. You can choose whether to build a courtroom around it. You can choose whether to search for evidence that confirms it. You can choose whether to ask your body to replay it for another hour. You can choose whether to return to facts, to prayer, to support, and to the next responsibility. That is why Isaiah's image of a mind stayed on God is so practical. Staying is not passive. It is a repeated act of returning. And then move. Take the step while your hands still tremble. I want to make this even more concrete, because take the step can sound simple until you are standing in front of the thing you fear. If the step is opening a message, reduce the task. Sit somewhere you feel grounded. Put both feet on the floor. Decide who you will call if the news is difficult. Open the message once. Read what it actually says. Do not immediately add 10 meanings. If you do not understand it, identify the right person to ask. If the step is an appointment, bring written questions. Ask the professional to slow down if necessary. Repeat back what you heard. Let me make sure I understand. Take notes. Ask what is known, what is not known, what needs action now, and what can wait. If the step is waiting, then waiting itself needs structure. Decide what you will do while you wait. Eat, work, walk, pray, keep appointments, take care of your children, answer ordinary emails, rest. Let life contain more than the unresolved result. Waiting does not have to mean psychological suspension. This is not disrespecting the seriousness of the news. It is refusing to let one unknown occupy every room in your mind. Now consider the second objection. What if I cannot get certainty before I must act? This is one of the hardest forms of fear, because it removes your favorite bargaining chip. You would act if someone could promise the result. You would decide if every risk were visible. You would speak if you knew how the other person would respond. You would choose treatment if you knew exactly how it would go. You would set the boundary if you knew the relationship would survive it. But sometimes action comes before certainty. That does not mean action must be reckless. It means you may need to make the best faithful decision with the information available, while remaining willing to adjust. This is where fear often tries to pull you back into the old strategy. It says, just think a little longer, check again, ask one more person, wait for a feeling of peace that never comes. Imagine the worst one more time so you are ready. Do nothing, because doing nothing cannot be the wrong decision. But doing nothing is also a decision. Again, I am not telling you to rush. I am telling you to stop treating perfect certainty as the price of faithful action. Ask yourself 4 grounded questions. What is the actual decision in front of me? What information is necessary before I make it? Who is qualified to help me understand what I do not know? What is the cost of waiting for certainty that may never come? You do not need a complete map to take a responsible next step. That last one can feel especially difficult. Fear wants a choice with no vulnerability. Life often gives choices where each path has a cost, a limitation, or an unknown. Wisdom is not the discovery of a painless option. Wisdom is the ability to choose faithfully among real options. This is another place where the old strategy can return. After you act, fear may begin reviewing the decision obsessively. Reflection can be useful. Rumination is different. Reflection asks, is there new information that requires adjustment? Rumination asks the same unanswerable question and demands that the past become certain. You can learn without reopening the decision every hour. You can correct course without condemning yourself for not knowing what you could not have known. You can be responsible without requiring omniscience. Only my Father sees the whole. You are not asked to. That truth can feel like relief, but it can also feel like loss, because part of you wanted control. You wanted to solve uncertainty by thinking hard enough. You wanted to prevent pain by anticipating it. You wanted to protect everyone you love by staying mentally on guard. I understand why that strategy feels loving, but there comes a point when vigilance stops protecting love and starts stealing from it. It can even steal tenderness from your relationship with me, because prayer becomes another attempt to obtain certainty instead of a place to become faithful. You may find yourself praying, tell me exactly what will happen, give me a sign, show me that everything will turn out the way I want. I know the desire beneath that prayer. You want relief, but trust is deeper than prediction. Prayer is not a mechanism for forcing the future to reveal itself. Prayer is a place where you can tell the truth, receive care, ask for wisdom, and become willing to do what is yours without possessing what is not yours. That is why the question I want you to carry is not, can I know enough to stop being afraid forever? Ask, can I be faithful with what I know and entrust what I do not know? That question restores proportion. You may be wondering whether this means you should stop hoping for good news. No, hope is not the same as prediction. Hope can face in the direction of good without claiming certainty about the outcome. That matters because some people try to protect themselves by refusing hope. They say, if I expect the worst, I will not be hurt. But expecting the worst does not remove pain from difficult news. It only adds anticipatory pain before you know. You do not need to punish yourself in advance to prove you are realistic. Realism says, this could be difficult. Fear says, therefore I must suffer the whole future now. Hope says, this could still go differently than I fear, and even if it is hard, I will meet the truth when it arrives. I also want you to think about the language you use with yourself while waiting. Words can either describe reality or intensify it. The actual problem may already be serious. Do not make it responsible for 10 additional problems that have not happened. That is why the old coping strategy must be evaluated not only by how it feels in the first minute, but by what it produces over time. Checking may give 5 minutes of relief. Does it increase the urge to check again? Reassurance may calm you briefly. Does it make you less able to tolerate not knowing later? Rehearsal may create a feeling of readiness. Does it leave you rested and clearer, or depleted and more convinced that disaster is certain? Avoidance may postpone the fear. Does it make the eventual step easier, or does dread grow while the task remains? When you evaluate the whole consequence, the strategy becomes easier to question. This is the cost of returning to the old guide. It may feel familiar, but familiar is not the same as safe. It may feel active, but active is not the same as effective. It may feel responsible, but responsibility has fruit. Responsible action gathers needed facts, makes a plan, seeks wise support, respects deadlines, protects safety, and then releases what cannot yet be known. Fearful control keeps demanding more, even after the useful work is done. So when you reach the point where the useful work is done for now, let that sentence be enough. For now, I have done what is mine. Not forever. Not perfectly. For now. Some of the deepest peace available to you will come from accepting the sentence, I do not know yet. Not loving it. Not choosing it. Accepting that it is the truthful sentence for this moment. Then add, but I know what I can do next. That is steadiness. You are not building your life on a forecast. You are building your next step on truth. So here is what I want you to do now. Identify the hard step that is actually in front of you, not the 10 steps after it. Name it plainly. Open the result, make the call, ask the question, attend the appointment, tell the truth, set the boundary, review the document, request help. Wait until the scheduled time instead of checking again. Choose the step that belongs to reality, not the step fear invented. Then allow fear to be present without asking it for permission. You may need to breathe slowly first. You may need someone with you. You may need to write the first sentence. You may need to pray before you move. You may need to remind yourself, I can feel fear and still act wisely. Then act. Within 24 hours, if anxiety is persistent or severe, identify one qualified mental health resource. You do not need to decide your whole treatment plan in one day. The step can simply be finding the provider, checking your benefits, asking your doctor for a referral, or scheduling an initial conversation. And going forward, create one repeatable limit for the coping strategy that keeps pulling you back. A checking limit. A reassurance limit. A research limit. A mental rehearsal limit. Make it realistic enough to keep and clear enough to notice when fear is negotiating with it. You are not trying to control your mind with another rigid rule. You are teaching your attention that uncertainty can be tolerated without endless feeding. This is how your practical action and your spiritual trust begin to work together. You face facts. You take wise steps. You receive support. You release prediction. You return when fear pulls you away. And now, before you move into whatever comes next, I want to pray with you. My Father, this person is waiting for news they are afraid to receive, and you know the weight of that waiting. You know the message they have not opened, the call they dread, the appointment they cannot stop thinking about, and the answer they wish they could control. You know what is real, what is still unknown, and where imagination has begun to fill the gaps. I bring their fear to you without pretending it is smaller than it feels. They do not need to impress you with calm. They do not need to hide the trembling in their body. Let this be a place where they can tell the truth. Father, I am afraid. I am afraid of what I may hear. I am afraid of what could change. I am afraid I will not know what to do. I am afraid that if I stop thinking about it, I will miss something important. I am afraid that if I act without certainty, I will make a mistake. Receive those fears, Father. Your word gives language for this moment. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you, not after every result is known. In the presence of fear, teach this listener to turn toward you instead of turning every possibility into a prediction. Where the mind has run far ahead, bring it back to what is true. Where the body has been living on alert, make room for breath, rest, food, sleep, movement, and care. Where imagination has become repeated disaster, bring clarity. Help them separate what they know from what they do not know. Help them recognize when planning has become punishment, when checking has stopped serving information, and when reassurance is asking another person for certainty no person can give. Give them courage with trembling hands. If the next right step is to open the message, help them open it. If it is to make the call, help them dial. If it is to attend an appointment, help them bring the questions they need. If it is to wait, teach them to wait without surrendering every hour to fear. Give them wisdom for preparation. Show them what actually needs to be done and what does not need to be done yet. Show them which information is necessary, which source is qualified, and where safety, treatment, professional support, or practical planning belongs. Then give them permission to stop when the useful preparation is complete for now. Keep them from confusing constant vigilance with love. Keep them from confusing dread with responsibility. Keep them from believing that imagining the worst is the same as being ready. Let their hope remain honest. They can hope for good news without pretending to know the outcome. They can pray for healing while receiving medical care. They can pray for provision while making a financial plan. They can pray for direction while asking qualified people for help. Where anxiety has become persistent or severe, lead them toward appropriate support. Give them humility to reach out and discernment to choose qualified care. Let prayer and practical care stand together rather than compete. Protect them from believing that needing help means failing in faith. If difficult news comes, meet them in the actual truth, not in all the disasters they imagined beforehand. Give them grace for one real problem at a time. If tears come, let tears come. If confusion comes, help them ask for explanation. If decisions are complicated, give them patience to seek wise counsel. If the path changes, help them adjust without treating every change as failure. My Father, anchor their mind in you. When thoughts scatter, give them a place to return. When fear grows loud, remind them that loud is not the same as true. When uncertainty feels like ruin, remind them that not knowing is not the same as losing everything. When they think they must become fearless before they move, remind them that courage can move while fear is still present. Then give them rest from the work that is not theirs. They cannot control another person's response, every medical result, every decision made by an employer, every financial condition, or every consequence. They cannot control the future by thinking harder. Release them from that impossible assignment. Father, I ask for wisdom beyond prediction. Not a secret timetable, not a guarantee. Wisdom. Show them the next faithful move. Show them when to seek counsel, when to stop searching, when to speak, when to wait, and when professional support is needed. Show them how to prepare without making preparation another form of fear. Do not let them measure faith by the absence of fear. Let them measure faith by where they turn, toward truth, toward wise action, toward safe support, toward honest prayer, toward your care, toward the responsibility actually in front of them. Hold what they cannot predict. Guide what they can do. Restore attention to what is real. Bring wisdom into decisions, and appropriate support where the burden has become too heavy to carry alone. Let this person move forward without waiting to feel fearless. They may tremble. They may need help. But they can still take the next faithful step. Prepare wisely, receive support, and trust beyond prediction. Give them patience for what cannot be rushed, courage for what should not be avoided, wisdom for what must be prepared, and humility for what cannot be controlled. Give them peace that does not depend on pretending everything will go the way they hope, but on knowing they do not have to live the whole future before it arrives. I entrust this waiting, this fear, this next step, and this unknown outcome to you. Amen. If this message helped you name the fear without letting it lead, share in the comments what next faithful step you are taking. Subscribe for more Christian devotional messages and prayers grounded in Scripture, practical wisdom, and honest trust.